I've been tasked with looking into the future and looking 30 years into the future and seeing the impact that it may have on senior living and on the continuum. So we went looking for a fortune teller and someone who could see the future for us. And unfortunately, Karnak is rather permanently unavailable. So we went looking elsewhere. And little did we know, inside our offices at Greystone, we had our very own fortune teller, our very own soothsayer, our very own person who can see clearly into the future and give us predictions about where we might be in the next 30 years. So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Greystone's very own soothsayer, seer of all future truths, pardon me, the amazing, the magnificent, Spoonak, the magnificent.
Spoonak! Oh!
Spoonak, over here, Spoonak.
Oh, over here.
This way.
Hello, oh great soothsayer.
Greetings. May your favorite goat have kittens.
Okay. We are so honored to have you here today to tell us the future. We are looking at least 30 years into the future. And here we have the great Spoonak's predictions. Here in these envelopes, right here. These have been hermetically sealed and kept in the unlabeled lunchbox in the refrigerator of Greystone's kitchen. No one knows what these contain other than the great Spoonak. Shall we begin? One at a time. As you want.
Now your toilet paper contains sand. 5778. 5,778
5,778 degrees Celsius.
That's what I said.
Yes, it was.
What is the temperature of the ninth hole of TPC Four Seasons at Las Colinas?
Thank you, oh great Spoonak. No,
Am I getting paid by the each?
you're not getting paid. Just volunteer.
The moon.
The moon.
Moon. Interesting.
Where is the only affordable real estate in the year 2055?
How many of you mow your own lawn or pay to have it mowed? Quite a few. I watch my husband do that all the time. But what if lawns became illegal? What if we couldn't have lawns anymore? What if we couldn't use the lawnmowers and the leaf blowers that we normally use now? By 2024, California will ban the use of gas-powered lawnmowers and leaf blowers. By 2027, all non-functional turf will be illegal in Las Vegas. You will have to remove it. And the definition of non-functional turf is whatever that particular government decides it's going to be. So what will we do if we don't have lawns? And why would we not have lawns? If you think about the pictures that we saw today of the communities, a lot of landscaping is in those pictures. But what will replace that landscaping? Landscaping will probably be replaced by native stone, drought-resistant plants, and then some other really cool things like microclover, bee turf, wildflowers, or maybe foodscaping. Anybody ever heard of foodscaping? Has anybody ever heard of arcology? Because in 2050, 2 out of every 3 people will live in an urban area. 2 out of 3. And we will begin to lose the land that we use for agriculture. So there'll be a need to bring fresh produce and greens to those urban areas. And how will we do that if there's not what's called arable land? When you research these things, you learn lots of interesting terms, like that greedflation thing. So what we might see is vertical farming. Do any of you have green walls in your communities now? I knew you did, I've seen it. But can you imagine that your green wall might be growing cucumbers in your common area? Because vertical farming will become something that is extremely common because it will allow us to bring that fresh produce and greens to the customer that lives in the urban area. Rooftop farming, there's an example of that on the screen. One of the things that was brought up in one of our management meetings was that you can lease the roof of your building for cell tower usage. Maybe you're going to be leasing the roof of your building for a garden. Or maybe you have the garden yourself and your residents are part of the people who help garden that rooftop garden. So, in designs featuring arcology, architecture and ecology meet, and architecture envelops green spaces. But let's talk about something else. Let's talk about transportation in the future. What if your residents never lost the ability to drive? Would you have to have more parking? Most likely. Most likely you would have to have more parking. By 2050, the sales of electric vehicles will reach 62 million every year. And there will be a stock globally of 700 million electric vehicles. So charging stations, which we're already putting in communities, will become more common than gas stations. But what will come after electric vehicles, because they're already here? What about self-driving cars? I actually talked about this with Edward one day, and he was like, well, when I get old, I expect to have, if Edward ever gets old, I expect to have a self-driving car, and I just go on vacation, and my car takes me there. So will we have to have more parking? Yeah, I can remember, having been in this business a long time, when we had very little parking for assisted living. But now we have a lot of residents who keep cars in assisted living. Do you think that will increase whenever self-driving cars become a real thing? Of course it will. But then, what about flying cars? Because we're not far. There's something called EVTOL, and that means they take off straight up in the air, and they land straight down. And then there are short takeoff and landing vehicles as well. So, can you imagine that your resident in independent living may order carry-out and it's delivered by a flying vehicle that lands on the roof? How would you get their food order to them from the roof? because that's easily what could happen. Now, we're a little ways from the flying vehicles. You know why? It's not really the technology. It's because they haven't figured out the regulations and how they're going to manage the air traffic. So there's actually a good bit of technology that allows for those types of vehicles, but the infrastructure's not quite there just yet. So you may have residents who, when they do need to go to the hospital, but we'll talk about that in another part of this presentation, it might be a flying ambulance. Or maybe we don't provide transportation anymore because of these personal flying vehicles that the residents can own. Transportation will change rapidly in the next 30 years. Oh, great spoonette. Please.
Silence.
One more prediction.
Alexa.
Alexa.
Who is the future ruler of the earth? You laugh. Karnak knows.
Yes.
Spoonak knows. Karnak's dead.
Distant relative.
Thank you.
Cousin.
Thank you, a wonderful spoonek. You know, people always make fun of me when I say please and thank you to Alexa, but I'm just hedging my bets. So, thank you.
Hold my pearls.
10-4. So, what if your employees worked 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, and never took a break except for to recharge, literally? The future of robotics is bright and is expanding exponentially. Nursing robotics is already forecasted to be a $1.5 billion industry in the United States in 2025. So that's only 3 years from now. Now, what does that look like for us? Well, meet Moxie. Moxie is a nursing assistant robot designed by a company called Diligent Robotics, completed and ready for service in 2017. And Moxie can currently perform about 30% of the tasks that a CNA performs in a healthcare environment. You can actually see Moxie in real life today. If you visit Cedars-Sinai Hospital in Los Angeles, you may run into Moxie roaming the halls. She's been in service there since the beginning of 2021. Now, the nurses at Cedars-Sinai use Moxie for a lot of the kind of time-consuming but simple tasks that often take up so much of their day. Moxie runs prescriptions, delivers lab samples, and can even get a gift from the gift shop for a patient. In the first 6 weeks that Moxie was at Cedars-Sinai, in the beginning of 2021, she saved their nurses from walking 300 extra miles. Okay? Nurses love her for an obvious reason. And Moxie can learn new skills, get smarter as time goes on. But how are people going to feel receiving care from something that looks a little more sci-fi than reality? A lot of people have started doing research into this concept, and they've found that human beings are far more comfortable receiving care from something that looks, sounds, smells, feels just like them. So there's a company right now actually developing a robot which is living human skin over top of an exoskeleton. Sound familiar to anybody? There's been a lot of movies about this. Turn up. Hey, Spoonak. Wake up. Okay. So.
You disturb my harmonic sleep.
I apologize.
I thought it was a trance.
It was one of those. So I didn't put this picture up here because honestly the prototype's very creepy and I didn't really want to scare anybody. But it's not going to be very long before a lot of these robots look a lot more like us, sound a lot more like us, and feel a lot more like us. Living human skin and growing hair. So, how else can nursing affect, or how else can robotics affect nursing? So this is a nursing assist robot. Here's another one right here. This one's called Hug. It's kind of cute. A lot of different companies are developing nursing assist, lifting assist robots at this moment in time. And really, they're trying to eliminate the perils of performing multi-person transfers in a healthcare environment. And actually completely eliminate the concept of a multi-person transfer altogether. There's a ton of different companies building these robots right now. Toyota is one. This Hug robot is actually built by a Norwegian company. And just imagine the implications that could have on your operation as you move forward. Imagine never having a workers' comp claim from a nursing aide who hurt her back transferring. Never having to give a raise. I like it.
Not having anyone on light duty.
Imagine being able to market yourself as a lift-free community where people don't need to lift. You think that would help you recruit a few extra CNAs? I think it's possible. These robots are getting increasingly sophisticated very quickly. And you know what? It's not just in nursing. Their application is right the way across our businesses. Housekeeping, minor maintenance, dining, all of these things are going to be affected by robotics in the future. This is a restaurant in Dallas. And this is a robot taking your order, busing simple items to you. This is real. This is happening now. And I know of at least one senior living operator in the country already who has one of these roaming around their independent living dining rooms at this moment in time. But it's going to get far more sophisticated than just these things. Does anybody recognize these little guys? Have you seen them anywhere before? So these are called Starship robots, and they're food delivery bots. They're essentially a Yeti on wheels with a brain. And they can deliver hot food, cold food, groceries, whatever you need. They have a 30-mile radius on one charge. They move at about 10 miles per hour, and they utilize the sidewalk. Again, the future is already here. These were launched years ago in Europe, and now have come to North America, and you can see their use is exploding exponentially year over year. So what does this mean for us? Are these little guys that are going to take Sue's food delivery from the roof and bring it down to our resident units? How are we going to let them into our communities? If we have a gated community, someone orders something from the grocery store and it's coming in, how's it get inside? What do we do design-wise in our hallways so that they don't run over our residents as they're delivering stuff? These are all real-world implications of this technology moving really, really quickly. Now let's talk about virtual robots. Let's talk a little bit about apps. We've seen a whole bunch of apps recently, and we've seen the impact of the gig economy on our workforce. I look at a whole bunch of employee engagement surveys year upon year, and there's a question that is, I would like access to the wages that I have already completed sooner. And that question just continues to go up in importance in surveys that I'm seeing. And there are apps for nursing already. There's Nurse Dash. I don't know if y'all are familiar with that, but also a lot of the agencies are using apps to fill their schedules. So in the future, do we not need to make a nursing schedule? Do we just post an open schedule out there into the cloud and nurses find us, populate the shifts that they want on the days that they want? That's going to give us a lot more part-time, flexible employees, right? Or maybe they're not even our employees at all. That's kind of a scary thought, right? Having other folks from the outside delivering care firsthand to our residents. But all of this may be a help to the labor pinch that we're feeling right now. And last but not least, on the robotic standpoint, I want to talk a little bit about AI, and I'm going to talk about AI a couple of different times. But, you know, AI is something else that is exploding in popularity. Right now, you know, its capabilities are kind of limited, but in the future, is it going to be able to look at our processes and our procedures and make our operations more efficient? Can it look at a housekeeper cleaning and design a more efficient cleaning schedule with less travel time, less packing time, things along those lines? Can it do the same in nursing? Heck, one day, can it be our MOD? Can it sit there and monitor our building, monitor access control, monitor our residents through a whole bunch of interconnected sensors, and if something happens, deploy resources? Heck, send Moxies there, if that's what it needs, and notify human beings. You know, the robotics field is here, and it's here to stay, and it's only going to get more popular, and those of us that don't begin to adapt and adopt these moving forward are going to miss out on some serious expense reductions on our bottom line as we move forward. A lot of these robots right now are really expensive. $300,000 plus at the moment. But you start to do a little bit of math on wages, benefits, workers' comp. It doesn't take a huge drop in price for these things to become feasible in the near future. Oh, you're awake. Great. It's time for our next prediction. Can I put these down, Bob? Thank you.
Not on the floor.
Oh.
Those are pearls.
Sis boom ba.
This? Oh, wow. Oh. Interesting.
What is the sound made when a sheep explodes?
The next envelope, please. Spoonak the Magnificent.
Are we done yet?
We're not.
No.
Unfortunately, we're not.
The metaverse.
Metaverse.
The metaverse.
What is the location of Greystone's new office?
Thank you, great soothsayer.
Can I go back to sleep?
No. Try to stay awake. What if your residents never died?
That was good.
That means all of them, not just your favorites. What if your residents never died? What if they lived much longer and healthier? What if conditions like kidney failure, heart failure, and diabetes didn't exist? You could have stable occupancy forever, right? Well, what if joint replacements, like anybody want to fess up and say they've had a joint replacement? Probably somebody. There's some athletic people, a knee or a shoulder or something. The most common reasons that joint replacements fail and that we get extended rehab stays and Medicare stays in our communities is because of problems with the joint replacement. Bad fit, cement breakage, things like that. What if those things didn't happen? Well, you know, we've talked about cloning in the past, and we're still a little ways from cloning human beings. If we think figuring out the regulations for flying vehicles is difficult, I think figuring out the regulations for cloning human beings is probably going to be a little intense. But joint replacements. There's a company called Monogram Orthopedics that is doing 3D printed joints. And when they map it on a computer and then print it as a 3D joint replacement, it fits specifically to that person. If you talk to an orthopedist today, he or she will tell you that joint replacements are one size fits none because they're generic. And so if you can have a 3D printed joint replacement, you could reduce or eliminate most of the risks and most of the conditions that cause those joint replacements to fail. On the good side of this, that's really going to reduce recovery time, rehab time, and it's also going to reduce coming back because the joint replacement fails. So, you know, all of us have kind of gotten used to with the new environment of Medicare that you don't get a whole lot of those good hips and knees to rehab anymore. You might not even get the bad hips and knees anymore because with 3D printing, those joint replacements will be so much more effective, successful, and with fewer problems. But if your bad knee isn't fixed with a 3D printed joint, you might want to wait a couple of years, and maybe you can just grow a new leg in the lab. Because lab-grown organs and body parts are already happening. They just haven't figured out how to get them from the petri dish to the body. Because while they can grow those cells in the lab, they haven't figured out yet how to bring nutrients to them, blood, things like that, that keep them alive, that keep the cells alive. When tissue engineering started about 30 years ago, they expected that lab-grown organs would be common within the next couple of decades. Lab-grown organs are available, but they are not usable at this point. So we know that hasn't happened, but the scientists really do believe they're close. So if we can extend our function with 3D printed joints, if we can extend our quality of life and our life with lab-grown organs, what are we going to want next? We're going to want the ability to have an extended lifespan. A couple of events ago, John Spooner, otherwise known as the Magnificent Spoonak, talked about something called telomeres. Anybody remember that presentation? Telomeres are found in your chromosomes, and every time a cell divides, it shortens the telomere. Now, scientists have figured out, and a lot of research has been happening with this, that if they can lengthen the telomeres, they can extend the life of the cells. And if they can extend the life of cells over time, they can extend your lifespan. And what they're going for is something called clinical immortality. Now, one of the problems with one of the processes they use to lengthen telomeres is unless they can control that, it causes unrestricted cell growth. And that presents a problem for cancers, because unrestricted cell growth can cause cancer. But they're working on a process that when they use this certain process, it's temporary. So over time, they will figure out how to use this process to lengthen your lifespan and to give us clinical immortality. So over time, you'll be able to keep your knees and your hips and your shoulders in good shape, possibly by having them 3D printed and replaced. So if all your joints are working good, you still got to worry about your heart wearing out, your kidneys wearing out. Some of us last night might be, livers, but you might be able to extend your life even more with lab-grown organs. So then the next thing will be, how do we extend lifespan? And that may be through telomeres. Tis time.
Spoonak wants to get an extended warranty on my new ear.
We don't do warranties.
An arm and a leg.
An arm and a leg.
An arm and a leg. A leg and an arm.
Whoever these Greystone people are need to get better envelopes. replacement parts that will be available at the body shop.
And to Sue's point, I pre-ordered a couple of livers last night, and we can sell them.
We're highest bidder.
So along the lines of what Sue was talking about with unlimited occupancy forever, let's talk about the future of medicine and the impact that it's going to have on our continuum for sure. One of the interesting things that I learned while reading through this is that our life expectancy in the next 20 years is not expected to get significantly longer than it is today. Maybe a year and a half, they're saying, in the developed world. But what is expected to get significantly longer is health span, to John and Sue's point. So, what do we do if people no longer get sick? What do we do if they live long and die short? And that's the norm, and not the special, the special few of us who get to do that. What does this do to construction? What does this do to skilled nursing? I mean, already we're seeing many people choosing not to put skilled nursing into their communities, but does this allow us to build a community without levels at all? Does this allow us to embrace the hospital at home model? And every unit looks just the same as everyone else, and we bring in care through robots, caregivers, things along those lines. What is this going to do to the continuum in the long run? Preventative medicine has gotten really, really common in the last 2 decades, and it's only going to get better. My Apple Watch can already take an EKG, but it's only a matter of time before it's going to be able to monitor my blood pressure, blood sugar, pathogens in my blood, look at my blood chemistry. Apple's already filed the patent for the blood pressure sensor, so that's not that far out. And like so many other pieces of technology in our life, it's only going to get more powerful, cheaper, and more capable as it moves forward. So imagine my wearable can talk to AI wirelessly. It can send all of that data about me and about my health. And AI can act like a diagnostician and maybe identify health problems I have before my symptoms outwardly present, all without any sort of human intervention. All of the other applications of wearables, they're almost endless, from fall prevention and notifying people to improving sight, improving hearing. We kind of laughed at the Apple Watch and a couple of the other ones to begin with, but they're the future. Now let's talk about wearables that you wear on the inside of your body. Let's talk about nanobots. Imagine an army of tiny little robots, pre-programmed, floating around your bloodstream, attacking viruses, pathogens, looking for plaque clogging up arteries, plaque in between our neural connections in our brain, physically maintaining us as we move through the day. Nanobots aren't that far away either. As I was reading this, one of the more interesting predictions that I saw was what we currently hold in our hand as an iPhone or a smartphone is going to be obsolete in the next 10 years. It's kind of an aggressive prediction, I thought. But what's going to replace the cell phone? Is it going to be a cool Dick Tracy watch or something along those lines? No, it's going to be a computer chip embedded into your brain, which is going to allow you to talk to machines simply by thinking. It's going to allow you to make phone calls simply by having a thought.
I can do that now.
Oh, that's impressive. Neurotransmission is something that sounds as far-fetched as growing your own organs and things like that, but Elon Musk has a company that has been performing real-world trials in pigs for the last 3 years, neurotransmission. This is not that far away. And imagine the implications of being able to call your doctor by thinking about it. Imagine being able to share how you're feeling with your doctor. They can understand how the symptoms are affecting you, things along those lines. Neurotransmission is not very far away, and pretty soon, in a couple of years, we're going to be saying RIP to the iPhone. Last but not least, I talked a little bit about AI when I was talking about robotics, but AI is already involved in a lot of hospitals right now in a concept called machine learning. So what AI does is it takes data from thousands and thousands of patients, and it can then start to accurately predict what's going to happen to a patient who has a treatment or a surgery or something along those lines by comparing their similar demographics, their genetics, their age, things along those lines. That's already in use in hospitals right now. But imagine if AI could go that leap further. Imagine if it can start to diagnose illness and prescribe treatment. I talked about AI maybe being our MOD. Well, what about an overnight nursing supervisor? Monitoring call lights, deploying Moxies to people in need. You know, those are all direct care applications. Let's go behind the house. You know, could it be a biller? Could it process claims for us? Imagine a piece of software that in real time can analyze thousands of different claims, correct coding errors without needing human intervention at all. Can also help in medical records, clinical documentation, things along those lines. You know, AI is already a part of healthcare, and there's a couple of great quotes and a couple of great things along it, but really it boils down to, you know, the applications of AI in healthcare are essentially unlimited, and those who are going to be left behind are those who refuse to adopt and work with it. Artificial intelligence is here and will continue to be the future. And heck, I didn't even get to this guy and all his cool little gadgets. But, I'm sorry, I'd like to go back. You know, Sue and I were tasked with looking 30 years out into the future. And that seems like a lot of the stuff we're coming up with is pretty far-fetched, right? Maybe more sci-fi than reality. So we thought it might be helpful to turn back the clock instead and look back at 30 years of technology and its adoption and its acceleration. So 1990, the internet first became widely available. I bet everyone can hear that dial tone sound right now in their head, right? 1992. Anybody remember texting with 444-223311?
Button a million times.
Any of that? That was 1992, believe it or not.
Netflix. I remember when my sister was getting Netflix mailed to her. Do y'all remember that? Google.
Oops.
No, you're good.
Maybe the shortest lived media form in the world, the DVD. Introduced in 1998. Obsolete already, right? Gone. The space station, they're saying it's at the end of its lifespan already.
Facebook and YouTube. Who remembers MySpace before YouTube and Facebook?
I love that YouTube homepage. It cracks me up. The iPhone was only 2007.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Bitcoin, 2009, the beginning of cryptocurrency.
The iPad and Uber. Who would have thought that 20 years ago or 30 years ago that we would have called somebody up on an app and they just kind of pull up to the curb and you go, "You my ride?" And they go, "Yeah." And you get in. It went against everything your mother told you, everything. But now it's extraordinarily common, and we do it all the time. So,
2012, the first self-driving cars by Google were introduced. And the concept of gene editing, and the Curiosity rover landed on Mars. We've already landed another rover on Mars since that period in time. You know, we all made fun of the Oculus VR headset for a little while, and especially the people walking around wearing them. The metaverse would not be possible without the VR headset. And it's getting a lot faster and a lot better.
and the people wearing them are having a good time.
Mm-hmm. Our future overlord was spawned
That's right.
2014.
Multi-use rockets.
5G wireless. That was 2017. That feels kind of like yesterday. It's 5 years ago it started to hit the market.
Quantum computing and foldable displays, which I have no idea what it is.
And then in 2020, mRNA vaccines.
Thank goodness.
I mean, that's 30 years, pretty much, 28 years. It's pretty amazing what's changed. It makes a lot of what we're talking about feel far less far-fetched than it might actually be.
And if technology moved that fast in those past 30 years, it's going to move faster in the next 30.
So we're going to close with one final prediction from the magnificent Spuna.
The final prediction.
Silence, please. June 23rd, 2022.
June 23rd, 2022.
2022.
See, that's today, I think. Isn't it?
Today.
last time Sue and Andrew ever presented at the Greystone event.
Bye-bye.